Bueno, chicos, artistas famosos del mundo hispano, continuado, o sea, parte 2. Primero, Diego Velázquez. Diego Velázquez nació en Sevilla, España, en el año 1599 y murió en 1660. Es conocido por, pues, su estilo principal era realismo. Tenía un gran talento en realismo y pintando la realidad. Su obra más famosa se llama Las Meninas. Y él era el pintor del rey de España, Felipe IV. Pintó el rey, la corte, bufones, los enanos y todo que tenía que ver con la corte. Y firmaba sus cuadros como pintor del rey, pero el rey lo tachó y escribió el rey de los pintores porque estaba bien impresionada por su talento artístico. All right. So this guy, Diego Velázquez, his style is realism, super talented in a realistic style. His most famous painting was called Las Meninas. So he was the painter for Felipe IV, the King of Spain, and basically he painted life around the court. And in this painting, Las Meninas, which is basically about 10.5 feet tall, you can see he was commissioned to paint the king and the queen. But in the painting, the way he lays it out is very interesting. Here you can see the Princesa Infanta Margarita. She's 5 years old. This is the only daughter of the king and queen, the only surviving daughter, I should say. And she's being waited on by two ladies in waiting, and those are Las Meninas. So Meninas means ladies in waiting, or basically the assistants to the princess. And over to the right, you can see these dwarves over here. There's a dwarf here tending to a dog, one of the dogs, and I'll talk about the dwarves here in a minute. But to the rear, you can see Don Jose Nieto Velázquez. That's the Queen's Chamberlain during the 1650s. And right here is the King and Queen of Spain. So what he did is, this is Velázquez himself. You can see the painting right here, how big it is. And so he did actually fulfill the task of painting a portrait of the King and Queen, but they're in the mirror back in the back. So it's very interesting the way he set this up. A very groundbreaking work of art. Let's take a look at some other works of his. Otras famosas obras de Velázquez. Here you can see the dwarf Francisco Lescano, and another dwarf here, portrait of Sebastián Morra, and then another portrait of the Queen, the Princess Margarita. Why dwarves? Back in the day, if you were a dwarf, you couldn't really get a job anywhere. So a lot of the times the palaces, the royal palaces would, in exchange for lodging and food, would ask these dwarves, or these little people, to basically entertain the guests that came by to visit the king and queen, or the guests of the palace. So they would get free lodging and food in return for just hanging around the palace grounds and being entertainment and companionship for the people that were there. So when you think of Velázquez, think of realism and think of Las Meninas, okay? All right. Next artist, Francisco de Goya, nació en España en el año 1746, murió en 1828. Su estilo principal era realismo y es conocido por el 3 de mayo, es su obra más famosa. También se dice que es el precursor de pintura moderna. Pintó para el rey Carlos IV y era sordo en sus años avanzados. Y este ayudó en mejorar su habilidad de pintar. So this guy was a realistic painter, or he painted in the realism style. His most famous work is called The 3rd of May. Let's take a look at that. Here we go, El 3 de Mayo. And he sought to commemorate the Spanish resistance to Napoleon's armies during the occupation of 1808. So this is basically depicting the horrors of war and the Spanish versus Napoleon there. It was a groundbreaking work, and it's considered one of the first modern paintings, in the modern era. But basically, Goya, he painted for the king. He didn't really like the king, and some of his paintings you can see his attitude towards the king, and he did it very subtly. He went deaf in his later years. And this impediment helped sharpen his artistic ارtistic Here's another work of Goya. So basically, think realism, think El 3 de Mayo when you think of Goya. Here's some other works. Here's his some portraits of the king, and you can see they're not so flattering. So he kind of felt that the king didn't really act as a king should, and very subtly he showed you his attitude towards the king in his paintings. Okay, next artist, Diego Rivera. Diego Rivera nació en México en 1886, murió en 1957. Es conocido por ser el líder artístico del Renacimiento mexicano y el líder del muralismo. Entonces su estilo principal era muralismo, es decir, pintar en una pared o muro. Y en sus murales expresó la historia mexicana. También es importante que sepas que se casó con Frida Kahlo. So this guy was a muralist, meaning he painted murals on the side of walls, and he was born in Mexico. He's considered the leader of the Mexican artistic renaissance, and he was basically the leader of the muralism movement in Mexico. He married Frida Kahlo. This was like his third or fourth wife. They had a very tumultuous marriage. They both cheated on each other. There was infidelity on both ends, and he had a violent temper, and therefore that led to divorce. But they remarried later, and here's some of his works: The Flower Seller, 1942, and The Grinder in 1924. But basically, he painted murals of normal Mexican people going about their daily life and scenes of Mexican history. Here's another one of his works, El Vendedor de Alcatraces. Okay, Fernando Botero nació en 1932 en Colombia. Su estilo principal es pintando figuras exageradas, o sea, gordas. So this guy, this Colombian artist, is still alive. He was born in 1932, and his main style is painting these what most people refer to as fat people, these rotund, whimsical figures. What happened is once he painted a mandolin with an unusually tiny sound hole, which made the mandolin look really huge with exaggerated proportions. And then he just kind of took that and ran with it. So all of his works of art look like the people are, for lack of a better word, fat. And so you can check out these three works here. Here's his version of the Mona Lisa. He has a horse over here. As you can see, they all look basically too big for the space they're in. He basically said that he doesn't paint fat people. What he paints is volume and the sensuality of form. So that's Fernando Botero. Think corpulent people. And we'll move on to our last artist now, Joan Miró. Nació en 1893 y murió en 1983. En Barcelona, España, su estilo principal era surrealismo, también un poco de cubismo. Conocido por The Farm, Harlequin's Carnival, and Blue. Son sus obras más famosas. Basically, he felt that he didn't want to paint in the classical style, and Therefore, he chose to paint in a very abstract way. So let's look at some of his works here. Blue, The Farm, 1922. And we have some more works. Harlequin's Carnival, 1924. And Figures at Night Guided by the Phosphorescent Tracks of Snails. So his main style is Cubism and a little bit of, surrealism, and there's a little bit of Cubism involved there too. Okay, so thanks for watching. Gracias por ver este video. Nos vemos en clase y adiós.